Every single time I get off stage, the number one question I'm asked is, how do you get it all done? And one of my observations is that I get a lot done because I actually obsess most over the most ordinary parts of my life, like laundry and picking up the house and making sure everybody has food to eat. Like all of the most menial things of the day, I work to contain that in like the smallest possible container in my life so that all of the rest of my life and my brain space and my creativity is left over for the extraordinary parts of life. And so I'm playing around with this idea of creating like an online course where I give you the mindsets, the tools, examples, and like ways I literally own the ordinary in my life. Because that is what creates so much space for the cool things I get to do and the places I get to go and the people I get to meet and the time for relationships with people that I really, really care about. And so I'd like your feedback on, is this concept meaningful? There is a link in show notes that has a link to a survey. It's like 4 questions long. It'll take you less than 6 minutes to fill out. Thank you so much for giving me a couple of minutes of your time. Thank you for listening to Scare Confident. Thank you for being on this journey with me in the last 2 years. I was just looking at the feed and we're at like almost 170 episodes. Like that is so wild to me. So anyway, life is rad. See ya.
I'm a small town kid born with a big city spirit. I choose to play a lot of awesome roles in life: mom, wife, entrepreneur, CEO, board member, investor, and mentor. 17 years ago, I founded a marketing consultancy, and ever since, my husband JR and I have been building our careers and our family on the exact same timeline. Yep, that means 4 kids, 3 businesses, 2 careers, all building towards one life we love. When I discovered that I could purposefully embrace all of these ands in my life, it unlocked my world. And I want that for you too. I'm Tiffany Souter, and this is Scared Confident. This interview is with CJ DuBé. I was speaking at the EOS conference and somebody came over to me and said, "You have got to have her on your podcast. She needs to tell her story." And I said, "Okay, let's do it." So you guys get to hear alongside me as I learn about CJ's story. She is 20 years ahead of me and has this like incredibly vivacious, crazy energy, the heart of an entrepreneur, the soul of a visionary, and she and her husband have 7 kids. And so we talked about, how do you put 40,000 pounds in a 10-pound bag and really live a life that you're proud of, and talked a lot about the role that rest needs to play in our ability to be able to be good for a really long time. So I loved this conversation with CJ. She is an EOS implementer. So if you know the language, she helps companies implement EOS and also does a lot of training for EOS International. Listen in as I have a conversation with CJ DuBé. So I'll start with this question and then you can take it where you want. I've met you one time. We were in proximity together for maybe 15 minutes or less, like very short,
Right.
just to give listeners a.
Right.
And it is clear in that short instance of time with you that excellence is a standard for you. I just experienced that. That's who you are. It's in you. And I have observed, I think, in my life that excellence is not an accidental condition. And so there are things that have taught you that. Like, it's just clear. The way you present yourself, the way that you make just all of it. It's like, she's clearly a package of excellence. That's her standard. So tell me, what informed that for you, and what about life has led you to that?
When you say excellence, it's kind of like saying mastery, right? And mastery never ends. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that, sure, I'm a perfectionist in certain areas and I want things certain ways, but I'm also a, driver, quick start that goes fast and wants things certain ways, but I'm willing to let go too.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said the word excellence, literally what popped in my head was my father.
Mm.
My father, in so many ways, was my mentor, my catalyst, there's a lot of Jekyll and Hyde that went on with him, but he taught me to be sophisticated, to be classy, to be clear, to be direct. And at moments, I'm a bull in a china shop because I am so direct. And so I work really hard to know who I'm talking to, who I'm with. And I don't give myself up, but I do mirror to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to appeal to people that are in front of me. And I think the clearest way is to say it is doing EOS and doing everything I've done in my life. I've had a passion for it, or I can't do it. If I don't love what I do, even owning my own business prior, if I don't love it, I'm not going to bring it. And I want to bring it for the benefit of all the people in front of me.
What did your dad do? What was in his life that demonstrated that to you?
He was in sales, and he was a top performer for the large gas company in Minnesota. But sometimes it's not what they do that's great. It's what they don't do that teaches you. And he always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And my mother would never let him quit the corporate job because she felt she needed security. Financially, she wasn't a risk taker. He was more of a risk taker. So he ended up having a lot of property rentals, which I would go with him to. So I saw a lot of that. But if you really want me to get real and raw, he was an alcoholic. It was the day of the martinis.
Totally. In sales, it was very rich. Yeah.
Right. He was raised in the days of the martinis, and he didn't have a father being raised. His mother raised him. And so there's a fair amount of really good that I saw in him. And there was a fair amount of evil, mad, anger. But at the end of the day, I never hurt for a thing. I was raised basically middle class. He was a high functioning alcoholic. And I love you, Dad. You've been gone 28 years now. So he died at the age of 59 of throat cancer. He literally had to talk with one of the machines.
Wow, CJ.
And so our voices changed and he healed. And I think the best picture to describe how he changed was at his funeral in small town, rural Minnesota, 500 people there. And you had the Jim Lehman, Tom Lehman's dad, insurance agent, was one of his good friends, was there. And then there was this gentleman who I don't remember his name. And he was about 6'8", and he had a biker jacket on.
Yeah.
And tattoos up and down his arms, which was not character that I was used to. And he came up to me and he told me that my dad had saved his life because he took him to and from 3 days a week to AA.
Wow.
So we healed a lot in those years of cancer. As terrible as cancer is, we had a lot of healing. And he told me, CJ, the last 2 years of my life have been the best 2 years of my life. So when he left this earth, I said, I'm be damned. The last 2 years of my life are not going to be the best 2 years of my life. So I've been living with that motto for a long time.
Yeah. So tell me your journey, CJ. You grew up, where are you in your birth order?
I have one brother,
Okay.
and I am the oldest.
Okay.
And yes, I have all of that.
Yes, I would have guessed that. Yes, we can find each other, we oldest children.
Yeah, especially oldest daughters of fathers. I remember your talk, though. You had some influence with your father, right?
I mean, for sure. Yes. Yes.
My father's influence us, which is a great thing. I spent ultimately 30 years in the placement industry. So I did everything from HR to IT to legal to banking to finance, you name it. I did placement, both contract placement and permanent placement. Once upon a time, I worked for that large international staffing firm where I had 5 divisions downtown Minneapolis and great teams. And I just got to the point where the layers were getting more and more and more. And I was entrepreneurial. And so I'd have an idea and I'd throw the idea out and they'd come back 6 weeks later and I go, yeah, I tried it. Didn't work. They go, well, we approved it. I go, yeah, it didn't work because I did it anyway.
Yeah.
So then I left. I left and I had the bug to be an entrepreneur. It was just in me. I knew I wanted to do it. So 2 things happened. And of course they happened simultaneous. One, I bought a franchise. So I owned a massage center where I had 8 rows of 15 employees. And then an offer came through to partner with an HR contract consulting firm and build it from scratch. So I was the founder and built it up from 0 to 8 million in 3 years.
Wow.
At the same time, I was doing the massage center on weekends
Wow.
and I had 7 children.
No.
You didn't know I had 7 children?
No.
Yes.
You have 7 children?
I have 7 children and 12 grandchildren.
Oh my goodness. I knew you had kids. You have 7 kids?
Yes.
And you had 2 businesses, so what were their ages in that season?
So my husband and I blended 27 years ago.
Okay.
When he had 3 and I had 3, and they're all a year to 18 months apart, except we have an ours. And Logan is 24 and the oldest is 40.
Okay.
And there's 8 years between Logan and the next
Okay.
oldest.
Okay, so he's like almost an only.
So he is like an
Yeah.
only. So anyone that wants to talk about birth order or any of those kinds of things, yeah, I can cover just little pieces of everything.
Yeah.
Right. So the massage center, though, the beautiful thing about that is my daughters were in high school. And so they all worked in the massage center and learned a little bit about entrepreneurship. Is that at the end of the day, they ran it. They were there during weeks. They were able to take work study programs. They could get out at 1 and they'd go work for the rest of the afternoon. And so all my daughters, 4 of them, are very independent, very strong, and know how to be an entrepreneur and have their own businesses.
So how do they talk about that experience? And you were living this path in a different time,
I know.
right? Can we just say that on the microphone? Like really, I feel like now at this stage, like very applauded that I have all these ideas of things I want to go do as a strong, independent woman. I'm using quotation marks. And I have 4 daughters. And so I'm such an example to my daughters to raise them to be strong, independent. Like this is the narrative of today. But that was
Yes.
not the narrative of your time.
It was my narrative, though. Well, a couple of things. First marriage wasn't great. We're not going to go deep diving into that right now. And so I learned that I needed to be financially sound myself. And I think I always was even before that. But when someone told me I had to have dinner on the table at 5, yeah, that wasn't me. Not who I was. And so I've told all my daughters, you need to be strong and independent and be able to take care of yourself and have equal relationships in your marriages. And I would tell you, they all have that. Some have taken longer to get that. My 2 birth daughters get it really strong. They're entrepreneurs of their own right. They work. They have good relationships. A couple have had bad relationships and learned from the bad relationships. I want all my children to be strong. I've never had it be about, yes, I want my daughters to be strong, but I want my sons to be strong too. But I want my sons to be respectful and appreciate women that choose to work. I have sons that have wives that do not work, but that's their choice and they're great partners together. So my theme is really just to say, I want people to be able to be strong and do what they love doing and take care of themselves so they can take care of their children. Because for me, it was, how am I going to take care of my children and still passionately love and do what I do?
Do you look back at that season? I think the great boogeyman, okay, I'll just claim it as mine. The great boogeyman in my own head is that, because how can I ask you how old you are, CJ?
I am 60.
So I'm 42. So you're at a place where you're reflecting on your 40-year-old self and the choices that I made. Would I do it differently? Would I see it differently? And did my kids, like, I'm really asking myself all the time, are my kids going to be all right? You know, like I've got from 14 to 2-year-old, and the choices that I make have consequence in their life. Some of them are wildly amazing. Like they get to go to Europe when they're 10 and they get to go wherever they want. Some of them, it requires sacrifice from them that sometimes I'm gone overnight and that's harder the next morning before school. And I'm okay with the fact that their life is not always exactly as they want it to be. I think that's important. But I also know there's choices I'm making for them that they may look back and say, I wish you would have made different choices, Mom. I don't know. But do your kids talk about the maniac that is your brain and your ambition and your passion, and you're just like, I got to get this out of me? Do they be like, Mom, you're crazy and I love it and it was great?
They're adults and they say, Mom, you're crazy. Here, I'll tell you a little story. So I'll tell you 2 things. One, I used to anguish all the time on how do I feed myself, do the roles that I wanted to do, and yet meet the expectations and the demand of the role I was doing. Because the expectations and the demand, whether you own your own business or you're sitting at a senior leadership seat, it doesn't matter. There are demands that come with it. And I truly wanted to meet those demands, but there was many times I felt like I was in duality over it. And I was in conflict because part of me was like, I want to be home with my children. Part of me was, no, I want to go off and speak and do this thing, right? And so I spent a lot of time. Here's Gino's line. We all deserve 7 years of therapy. And I'm probably on year 14 or 15. So there was a lot of therapy in my life. But someone said to me, CJ, the number one thing a child wants is for you to be 100% present with them. So I instituted things like Wednesday night, kids' night dinner out when dad was golfing. It was just me. We'd go out to dinner and we'd laugh and have fun because they were usually middle school, high school, right? And I had Logan.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, I had a 14-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Actually, I had a newborn and a 14-year-old almost, but yes, similar. So I made sure I was very, very, very present. And I still do that. I still will say, I'm going to take this grandchild. I took 3 girls to play in Minneapolis just so I could give them individual time. So that's the one thing that's stuck with me. And they remember it. It's those memories that matter. I'm never going to be the grandma that picks you up after school and is your daycare provider. It's not me. I'm not it. The other thing, though, I will tell you, and you've probably experienced it because you've done EOS, is the team health exercises, right? The question in personal histories is, what's the hardest thing for you growing up? Well, having a happy hour with one of my daughters, getting into a deep conversation, I asked her that question. What was the hardest thing for you growing up? One, she said, being a middle child, because she was in the middle.
Mm.
And she said, 2, my mom not being around as much as I wanted. And that was fact. But she said, fast forward, to be as strong or as independent or be who I am if you were something different.
And were you able to receive that, like, as that's a fact? Or
I received it as a fact. And one other thing she said to me, which I stopped doing, she goes, Mom, you're always running so much. So when you call me because you want something. It's just so true. And so I've learned more to just call to say, how are you? How is your week? Have no agenda, no purpose.
what a gift that she told you that.
Yeah, it's been a great gift. And that's probably almost 8 years ago now. Yeah, a long time ago.
I think I feel myself in you. Okay, so back to your story. So you had these 2 businesses that were happening simultaneously, the HR consulting and the massage therapy. So then what happened? I know you sold the HR consulting firm, right?
I did. Yeah, in 2009, 2 partners. Ultimately, they had multiple businesses and they purchased it back, my shares back. And that was a rough time because in some ways that was my baby. And so then I really found myself going, well, now what am I going to be when I grow up? And because I was a member of Entrepreneurs Organization, it was right when the Traction book was coming out. And Mike Payton was doing a fair amount of talks. And everyone kept saying, CJ, you need to read this book. You need to read this book. And I go, yeah. Finally, I sat down, I read the book and I went, oh, dang. I did some things really well, but whoa, I could have done things a lot better. And so then everyone says, well, you need to meet Mike Payton, which we did. We met, we bonded. I did the webinar with EOS Worldwide. And I got off the webinar, which was with Don Tinney, and he was the integrator at the time for EOS Worldwide. I got off the webinar, I walked into the living room, and I looked at my husband. I said, I know what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And he went, oh, here we go again. I'm 13 years in, so probably going to be for the rest of my life.
So you were in your late 40s at this time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Late 40s. And how old was Logan? I think that transitioned on when, like, depending on where your kids are, matters about what you, like, just stage gating how it all comes together.
He would have been 10,
Okay.
11, because it's 14 years ago. And it was when I started looking at it and started into it. And then 3 years into it is when we moved here to Arizona. So he started high school as a 13-year-old, a freshman here, but he was a scratch golfer.
Oh,
Yeah, basically still is. And so he played varsity golf here in Arizona all through high school as a freshman all the way
okay.
through. And he absolutely loves Arizona, but he would probably say it was hard too because I did have to travel a lot. I traveled more with him than I did with any of the kids because of the back and forth to Minnesota where my clients were.
So that's what you moved out there to do, was to open up that market for you or for them?
Yeah, that and real answer, man, you're getting a lot of truths out of me. As I tell everyone, I'm an open book. My husband suffers from seasonal depression and other depression, and he literally was retired even then and said, I can't live here anymore in Minnesota. And so that was a life choice. And I said, well, I can do EOS anywhere. And he convinced Logan, the 13-year-old at the time. And so it was an adventure and we moved. And I don't regret it at all. My soul is here in the desert and I am happy here and I come at peace here. And this afternoon, I'll do a long couple-hour hike in the desert and I will just be happy.
So my sister lives out there in Arizona too, and we did this amazing, it's not like a contest, but there's this thing called 7 Peaks. The National Parks Association puts it on, and you do 7 mountains inside of like the greater Phoenix area in a day. It's like 26 miles of hiking. Like, it's no joke. It took us 13 hours.
That's awesome.
So CJ, when you read the traction book, what do you think spoke so audibly to you? To have a moment that you run rushing into and say to your husband, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. Like, what spoke to you so audibly?
It's simple read, right?
Mhm.
One. And when I read it, I'm like, oh, I did that. Oh, I did that. And then I went, oh, if I would have just done structure first and people second, it would have prevented some turnover. It would have helped me look at people differently. If I would have followed core values strongly, I think we had them, but we didn't define them definitively. There's just so many things that EOS does that's simple, but makes huge rewards for companies and people. And I love to speak. I love to make a difference in people's lives, which ultimately, if I'm making a difference in people's lives, I'm making a difference for myself. I'm hitting my own heart, my own soul. I mean, the beauty of what I do with working with all the companies that I work with is I get to learn all day long too. I mean, I'm teaching, sure. I'm facilitating what's happening in the room. And God gave me the gift of intuition. You give me a look and I'm all over it. Right. And so I intuitively can see through things quite well, to the point of people saying, how did you know that? I go, it's just gifted to me. Messages come. And so I just knew then that it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Tiffany, honest to gosh, it was the hardest thing I had to do because I had offers on the table to go back to corporate America and my family needed the money. And in that period of time when I per se sold the business, it was very lowballed because it was the time frame of 09. I had 3 kids in college and I was running out of money. And I looked up one day and I had $100 left in my checking account, but I was so stubborn. I was still going to do EOS. I'm like, I'm going to do it. It's going to work. I didn't want to go back to work corporate America. I just didn't. I had to look at a lot of things in my life. I lost a lot of things in that time frame because I was stubborn and determined. I paid college tuition instead of mortgage. So I lost my home. It's painful. Every single moment though, and this is me, it's just me, I knew God had my back and I knew I was doing the right thing. And if we fast forward 13 years, I've helped to affect, change a lot of companies, people's lives, and my own. My own. The lovely home I have now. My 45-year-old self would have never thought that I have what I have now, ever. So pure grit, stubbornness, that's what it was. Because I believed so deeply I was doing the right thing and that EOS was the right thing and it could change people's lives and change companies' lives and change the world in many, many ways because the world needs entrepreneurs. But there was a lot of pain along the way. But the pain taught me a lot too. Now I kind of just ask God to not hit me so hard Just tap me. I promise I'll listen.
Why do you think you needed to go through that, CJ?
Oh, because I am that bull in a china shop sometimes, and I'll just go roaring this way. I like to break the seal on envelopes and do things like that. But fortunately, when it's down the wrong path, I am very, very blessed to have a Lord that
Mhm.
pulls me back. And that's why I say, don't slap me so hard.
I used to say I feel like I've grown a lot too, but that I played life like a game of bumper cars. I would just go really fast until I hit, and then I'd be like, "Oh, like over here." Having a high motor, like being mighty, as you say, like you can push through a lot of things that are like, "Yeah, that's kind of uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm pretty thirsty." Like, "Yeah, it is hot in here." But conditions are irrelevant to my behavior. Like you can just kinda keep going until you realize like, "No, this is actually like the car's on fire. Maybe we should get out."
There's times I have to physically be like, I have been hit by a bus downtown Minneapolis. Literally driving down a road, city bus T-boned me, went through a red light. Totally, I had to stop moving for
my
6
word.
months. He said, "You're done. I'm done. You can't move."
Oh,
No joke. So when the line comes, you don't want someone to get hit by a bus. You can survive.
that's amazing. When you're in those modes where you're like, I'm also a person of faith. So either God is shouting or the world is shouting or whatever you believe, the universe is shouting. How have you learned to find your governor, to care for yourself so that you have, I would say, more of a perpetual state engine instead of this revving up and revving down? What have you learned, CJ, in that process of maturing and learning yourself?
Well, so I've learned to put discipline in my life in certain areas, certain things I must do for myself. So yes, literally hit by a city bus downtown Minneapolis. But what healed me was massage. I owned a massage center. Crazy as the world works, I owned a massage center and I learned the modalities and the techniques and who to use and who not to use and what would heal me. And I healed very fast because I had that. And so today I must do Pilates, yoga 3 to 5 times a week. My back's not great. Just that simple. I need to read the Bible every morning. It's me. It's just me, not for everybody, but whatever that is for anyone. For me, that's what I do to get me grounded in the morning. I meditate every morning. And so usually it's reading, meditating, Pilates, back home, get ready, have a client. I take my clarity breaks, which is an EOS thing, and I'm hoping Tiffany's doing them. We all need our clarity breaks. We all need our time to just chill and think. Because then when the weird, quirky things happen or people overreact in front of you, I just have my routines of things that I need to do for myself.
So, in a week like this week, you shared earlier that you've been on 4 airplanes. Are you able to cling to those? Like, yes, I schedule the start times of my sessions. I fly in the night before if I need to. Like, do you
I always fly in the night before. So like I went to DC. I went for a walk, had a good dinner, was in bed early. Same thing. I was there for 2 days. It was their annual. Back on a plane, had a client in Minneapolis. I just preserve my evenings I make sure I get my sleep. I have to get my sleep. I need 7 hours. I really need 8, but minimum of 7. And so I'm pretty regimented on that. And I know when I can eat and when I shouldn't eat and what I should eat and when I shouldn't. But for me, I'm just making sure. And Tiffany, to be honest, I'm like, okay, last night, I'm like, I have to have the energy for Tiffany. Like I literally, and then I'm time zone different. So I was
Yeah.
East Coast Central and we flew in here. So those are the things that I pay attention. A lot of the things that we've been coached on over the years, I actually have implemented and I do.
So, I wanna pause on this clarity break thing.
Mhm.
Even if people don't run on EOS, we just share, like, what the concept is because it's a life skill that EOS has put into a process. Of all of the EOS tools, I'm pretty bad at it. I actually think I'm maybe intimidated by it, and if I was really honest with myself, maybe even scared, like, if I really sat on it. I don't know why, but I'm just, again, sort of, being transparent as well. So share with listeners what it is, and then, I don't know, will you give me, like, 4 minutes of free consulting here and, like, walk me through why I'm avoiding it?
Because you're probably a little like me and I avoided it too. So it's choosing a time and a place that you can be with yourself. It could be once a week for an hour. Some people choose to take clarity break weekends. I know of a professional woman who literally will take a long weekend once a quarter by herself, go to a hotel, do spa treatments, and spend clarity time writing. And whether it be weekly, monthly, daily, a lot of people like to say, well, I do a run. And I get that running or exercise gives us clarity. It's not getting our brains clear. And there's a lot to be said to pen to paper.
Mm.
And so, and even Gino today, in a lot of his newer content, he said, sit with yourself for a half an hour, which I've spent about 6 months working on that. It's hard to sit by yourself for a half an hour when you're the person that likes to run 90 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I think the fear is, what is your subconscious going to actually tell you?
Mm-hmm.
Our subconscious has a lot of messages for us, and sometimes we choose not to listen. And if we don't stop moving, we can't hear.
Mm-hmm.
But gold comes out of quiet, calm, and just letting whatever comes out come out. And there's times I'll do it a lot on a plane, put my earpods in and just, because I'm there for 2 hours, right? And sometimes I pull out a legal pad and I'm writing. I'm like furiously writing all these to-dos and all these things. But what I'm doing is I'm dumping my brain out onto paper. And then all of a sudden it starts to open up. And that's where I get an idea or a message. I should email so-and-so and text them this message.
Mm.
They need it. So there's beauty in the clarity breaks. It's a gift to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you can just know that you deserve gifts and give this gift of clarity breaks to yourself, you can find some peace and some calm. And then it's like even sometimes the saying, go slow to go fast,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you give yourself the time to just be, you'll actually go faster on things.
I know.
It's
I
clear.
I think I get so. I've tried a couple different formats. I was on this train of like, oh yeah, I've got to kind of find my way, and some of it is like, what's practical for my life.
Yeah.
It might be that I do my best clarity break away a weekend, a quarter, but it's not practical for my life right now. I tried a massage day, and literally like halfway through, I was like, I'm so antsy. Can I just leave? Like, I just can't. I can't do this right now. It was like a Tuesday. I was like so uncomfortable with being there in the middle of the day. Like, a whole thing was just like I was a twitchy mess. I'm like, this is stupid. Not the idea of a clarity break, but that I realized that was not my way of getting to a clarity break. Though it sounded great on paper. Um, are you familiar with the book The Artist's Way?
No, the artist
The
way.
Artist's Way. I haven't read it yet. I've ordered it. I had 3 people in the last, like, 2 weeks. This is the most Tiffany thing ever to recommend a book I've never read before, just in case those in the
Love it.
audience are keeping score here. But I know it walks you through the practice of daily journaling, and
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm feeling this pull as I've transitioned out of the business day to day to, like, my job is to be above the fray, but I'm so comfortable in the tasks of things, and the discipline of pulling myself above the fray is like, I don't know, maybe I'm scared I'll fail at it. Maybe I'm afraid there won't be anything there. Maybe I don't know. It's like really interesting. I feel this like internal tension right now around it.
You're a visionary, right?
Mhm.
So visionaries also have this push-pull of you think to the future naturally. You think 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out. You just naturally think that way. But you also think you have to prove to yourself that you've accomplished something. And sometimes accomplishing something isn't the tasks.
Mm.
You owe it to yourself, your family, your company to be the visionary, to use your vision. And if you don't clear your brain, you're not going to have the vision. You're not going to see. So you owe it to yourself. You deserve it. And the gift you will give so many other people because things become clear because now you see this vision to the future. Because I don't know about you. If I can't clearly see it, I have to see it a long ways out
Mhm.
to be able to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can do little tasks here and there just to get it off my plate, but it's like, don't do the $25 an hour work
Mm-hmm.
unless you love it.
I
Like,
don't really love it.
right. If you
Yeah.
love it, then do it. But otherwise, don't do it.
Yeah.
Because you do not need to do it. And I mean, it's like I tell people, I said, Gino says this all the time. He says, if you love mowing your lawn, then mow your lawn.
Mhm.
Other than that, you can get someone for $25 an hour to mow your lawn. I'd rather be doing other things, right? So I am a 10-year out thinker because of where I'm at in my life, too. I don't think I was 45, 48. I am now. I wish I would have been then.
I think you said the thing, this visionary conundrum of being able to see far, but needing the day of accomplishment, like needing to feel that. And my mind does not register yet my subconscious thinking as a worthy task. I've shared that I'm home more often with my kids when they get home from
Yeah,
school.
that's
And
great.
when I was home, when I like that 3 to 5:30 period was always work time. And then it became this, unpacking backpacks. And I was like, whoa, I'm rattling around in a tin can. I'm not doing anything productive. Like, and I had to
Yeah.
reframe for myself. The productive thing is being present for your kids. The productive thing is not getting email done. That's not the
Yeah.
task, Tiffany. The productive thing is being present and teaching my mind to register that as
Mhm.
an accomplishment. That's so interesting. I hadn't been able to
Yeah.
frame it to myself that way, but I think that's the exact same thing. If I'm like, I spent the whole day just thinking, but I didn't respond to an email, record a podcast, post something on social media, I would be like, I don't know what I did today. It's so interesting. I don't register it as completion, as a task worthy of being done. And so my body doesn't register it as progress. Wow. That was very helpful to me. Thank you for that. Okay, I wanna go another place here quickly. The podcast is called Scared Confident. I'm not projecting that this is part of your story, but I'd love to know if it is. For me, getting underneath this blanket of fear, was a very important part of me being able to step into the hole of who I now totally accept God has created me to be. But it took some work for me to say, I'm not going to let fear control my decisions. I'm not going to let fear control my dreams. I'm not going to let fear control what I'm worried about people perceiving of me. I am going to let my dreams control the outcomes of my choices, not fear. Has fear been present in your journey? And if so, what does it say to you for me, it's when I'm tired, when I'm distracted, when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm like, I don't have all my faculties together, fear can start to like really make me a topsy-turvy. How has that played out in your life, CJ?
Oh, fear has been back to my earliest memory of being 3. Fear's part of our lives, right? So fear is there all the time. Gino has this saying, and I know I've quoted him a couple of times here, but he does say, name the fear. So when I feel fear, I go, okay, what is it? What exactly am I afraid of? It's like my glass half empty husband. He always has to think of things in the worst case scenario in case they happen, which of course I don't.
Mhm.
But if I feel fear, I go, okay, what's the worst thing I could do on this podcast with Tiffany? Be too tired, be not rested, be not ready to go, right? Not be brave enough to say the things I've already said that I've never said before. That's what I told myself. I said, I'm just going to roll. I'm going to be me. I'm going to say it because I had a gut feeling with your scared confidence. You're going to ask me things that no one else would.
Mhm.
And you did.
Yes, good.
And that's good though, because when we get to the other side of it, I think you could agree that most of the time you're like, what was I afraid of? When in college, I saw, speakers and I go, I want to do that. And then I started doing that and I was scared to death.
Mhm.
And yet at the end of it, I had this exhilaration that like, you were so fabulous at the conference, Tiffany. I'm sure you had fear before you went on the
Mhm.
stage. And then after you're like, oh, this was absolutely fabulous.
Mhm.
Right. So sometimes we just have to bust through that fear to get to the fabulous.
Mhm. Did you grow up in a household that was brave or fearful?
Both. Seriously, my mother lived in fear nonstop. And my father was what I use Colby term, quick start visionary type person. So he was a risk taker.
Mhm.
She was like the complete opposite. So I had this duality always going, and I wasn't that close with my mother. I love her to death.
Mm.
Don't get me wrong. She's so alive. But he taught me to be big, bold, brave, say what I needed to say, push through. And then, yeah, he would have moments of yanking me back. So there was a lot of duality that I went through.
Mhm.
And I had to figure out what me was all along the way. And it's still a journey. I'm 60. I'm still going to be figuring this out. I'm 124. Yeah, I figure that's how long I'll live.
Okay, I read this not so long ago that how old you think you're going to be plays a really huge role in how long you actually live.
Yep.
Because you begin to orient your self-care, your nutrition, all those decisions on like, I think I'm going to. So I have pronounced 102 is how old I'm going to be. But I love 124. I could join you in that. I just don't know that I can conceptually believe that maybe science will get there. But I'm like 102, I could do that. I could do that.
Mine for a long time was 104. And then Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach said, add 20 years. So I did.
So this is your stated, yes, your
Yeah,
stated thing.
so 124 years.
That's great.
And my kids laugh. My adults are laughing all the time. They go, she'll probably do it. She'll haunt us for a very long time.
So when fear speaks to you, what does it say to you, CJ?
So there's two different ways of fear for me. I literally physically feel it. If I'm having a burn from my chest through my stomach, it's like, you're not doing the right thing.
Mm.
You need to go a different way. If there's just general stress in my body, my shoulders, my head is like, okay, you're scared, you're trepid, you just got to break through it, Siege.
Mm.
Right? So I've learned in my body to know what the fear is and what it is. And then there's fear. And then there is just the simple, what I would call my tornado, which is when I am running so fast and I don't allow myself down, even a few minutes of down, and I run and run. Because if I'm in a tornado, who knows what's going to fly out of that tornado?
Mm-hmm.
It could be a body. It could be a toaster. It could be anything could fly out of that tornado. And no one likes it when CJ's in a tornado. So that bringing us full circle to clarity breaks is if we don't take time for ourselves, that's what I call getting into my tornado. Question ourselves, lose confidence, forget things.
Okay, last question, and then and then I have a parting. Okay, two more questions. How have friendships been for you? Yeah, you're running fast. You have 7 kids. You have a million responsibilities, but you also need friends. So how have you made space for that, and what does that look like?
I am so very, very blessed to have friends that have been with me for, oh gosh, 40 years, 30 years, 20 years. I used to say I'm not a very good friend. And I would say that because I didn't have a lot of time for friends. Now, my husband and I golf. So we would have a lot of time where we'd go golf and golf with couples and have that kind of friends, right? Social friends.
Mm-hmm.
But my deep-hearted friends all know me extremely well. And there's 6, and I could pick up the phone and I could call any of them, and they would drop anything for me, and I would do the same for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been lifelong friends. So it is about blocking off the time with them to go do things. So I have a girlfriend who usually the, hunting weekend of Minnesota, she comes to Arizona and we spend the weekend together. This is her and I. And and that's healing for me. It's healing for her. And so I'm not that friend that's going to, talk to you 3 times a week. Yeah, I'm not that. But I am that friend that will say, where can we block off time together? Where can we go have a glass of wine or dinner? It may not be for 3 months, but when can we do it? Because we had periods of time in our life, right, where we were really close. And I think I have people that I work with, even EOS Worldwide, Kelly Knight. I consider Kelly a deep friend and someone I care deeply about, but we have also worked together over the years, right?
I think that it's important when you lead a lot of things, you can have a lot of relationships that are in fact real. But I have found I have had to work really intentionally to have a space where I can like free fall into those friendships where they don't need anything from me, really. Like we want relationship from one another, but they don't really need anything from me. And it's taken me a little time to recognize how important that is to like vitality in your heart, to have people like that care about you for reasons that aren't what they can get from you, who you are, your title, any of those things. They just love you.
They just love you, and you trust them. You trust them impeccably. So if they do tell you something you need to hear, you're going to listen.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Okay. Parting question. What advice would you give your 24-year-old self?
I would have told myself to slow down. I mean, I made choices of marriage. I mean, my kids are my kids and I love my kids to death and I don't regret ever having any of my children, right?
Yep.
But I would have thought differently about relationships and the choices that I made. I was always good at work choices. Personal choices took me a lot longer to figure out. And so my 24-year-old self was like, just slow down and think about what you really want.
Well, CJ, thanks for sharing so vulnerably today. I have really loved getting to know you. If you guys ever see CJ in person, she's this little sprite of a human being, like big in personality, tiny in stature, and dressed impeccably. And I love it. So CJ, thanks for sharing your story and your time with us today. It's great to get to know you.
This was wonderful, Tiffany. You fed my soul, and I can't wait to see you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Scared Confident. Until next time, keep telling fear, you will not decide what happens in my life. I will. If you want to get the inside scoop, sign up for my newsletter. We decided to make content for you instead of social media algorithms. The link is waiting for you in show notes, or you can head over to tiffanysauter.com. Thanks for listening.